Well, good morning. This is University of Maiduguri Center for Distance Learning. The course is GST 211 Communication in English 2. As you are aware, this is Bashir Osman, including Dr. Marcus, who will be handling the course. We're going to look at how we will improve on the proficiency of the use of English language. Now, the area we are going to look at here has to do with spellings and pronunciation in English. At the end of the topic, we are expected to know how important are English pronunciations and how we can pronounce English sounds. Next, we'll look at English sounds in general, then description of the sounds, consonants, and then vowels. The importance of phonetics in English pronunciations cannot be overemphasized. Looking at spellings of English, sounds of English, and the difficulties in English sounds pronunciation. The main reason is that English spelling system is not based on phonetic correspondence between sounds and letters. That is, as is expected of some languages like Spanish, Hausa, etc. Instead, in English, there are some letters which can produce different pronunciations. And unless if you know that, you will be find it difficult how to pronounce the sounds. Similarly, there's equally different combinations of letters which can produce same pronunciation. Here, the discrepancies between spelling and pronunciation in English is illustrated in the word or in letters of, for instance. That is when you have some words like buff, calf, rough, throw, tough, and full. Here, the spellings are retained maybe as the time when GH is represented as a single consonant and then pronounced. Another discrepancy is the many different spellings of the sound sh, for instance. That is when you have SH, then you have sh sound. That is when you have a word like anxious, fission, fuchsia, and ocean. The sh sound is realized differently. Here, the correspondence between sound and spelling in English is not phonetically exact for two main reasons. First, spelling changes did not keep the pace with changes in the sound system after the development of printing and confirmation for spellings. Example, when you have letter K, then as in knife, and then maybe GH as in right. These are the relics of Middle English period, that is from about 1100 to about 1500 AD, when they were pronounced as separate words. For another reason is that some important spelling conventions still persist. For example, during the 16th century, the B sound is inserted in the word maybe doubt. That is when you pronounce the word doubt on the authority of Latin source of the word debiter. Although the B sound, that's the B sound, is silent. That's when you have, as we've said, doubt. Here we have different spellings. That is the British and then the American spelling. That is when you have some words that are exemplified as center, theater, color, honor, defense, or agonize. Then you have the American pronunciation, spellings too. Then you have the British counterpart. Since the spelling of English does not correspond with its pronunciation, then there is often a considerable difficulty, especially on the part of non-native speakers, to pronounce certain words correctly. This is because most of us mostly make our first contact with written rather than spoken form. That is, one is at liberty to spell words maybe correctly but cannot pronounce them correctly. Some of our pronunciations then tend to be orthographic rather than what? Rather than phonetic. Hence, it is a common tendency to pronounce, for instance, let's take as the word debt. Some may include the b sound as in death, but the correct pronunciation is not depth, rather death. And when you have call, some may pronounce it as what? Corpse. That is a wrong pronunciation, which otherwise the b and the p there is silent. But the fact that we do not have direct contact with people that speak impeccable English is not an excuse for our mispronunciations. We can, and if we like, find out the exact and correct pronunciation of a word by checking what? By checking a dictionary. Every good dictionary contains, as a rule, the phonetic transcription of each of its word, of its entries. To be able to make sense of these transcriptions, however, one needs to have a basic working knowledge of phonetic symbols. And those symbols are used for transcriptions. So here we are going to look at how we can transcribe the sounds for an effective sound representation. But before we look at it, here, looking at the sounds of English, there are 44 sounds which are termed technically as phonemes. Why are they phonemes? Because they are a unit of a minimal sound of a language. Then a unit of a minimal sound of a language, for English, we have 44. 24 are termed as consonant sounds and 20 are vowels. Then if you sum them up, you have 44. The vowels are further classified into what we termed as pure vowels or monophthongs, those involving only one sound, and diphthongs, those involving two sounds. In dealing with these sounds, it is important to always bear in mind the fact that there is, in most cases, no one-to-one relationship between the sound and then how it is spelled. That is due to lack of correspondence between spelling and then the pronunciation we are talking about. In many instances, a letter of the alphabet may pronounce in many different ways. For instance, the letter C, and then in some words is realized as what? As, that is C to S. That is when you have a word like maybe center, nice, place. Here, the K equally is what? Is pronounced as in word like cat, come, skull. Similarly, the letters is pronounced in some cases as what? Z, that is letter Z. As in what? As in dogs, rise, Wednesday, etc. And again, we have similar sound like sh, as in what? Passion, mission. But in some cases, the same s becomes, sh becomes s, as in what? Assume, assign. While it is pronounced as j in some cases when you have a word like vision or fission. Fission. So these are lack of correspondence between what? Between the spelling and then pronunciation. On the other hand, however, a particular sound can have different ways of spelling. For example, when you have the sound K, that is letter K, is spelled with the letter K, as we have said, in the word. Take, for instance, when you have king, kit, or kid, with X as in what? As in six, fix, box, accept, etc., etc. With again Q as in what? As in key, click, conquer, etc., etc. And when you have C as in cat, cord, can, similarly the sound F, that is F, is spelled in number of ways. With F as in what? As in food and farm. With again letter P, H, pronounced as what? As phone, and graph. And again with letter GH as in what? As in calf, laugh, and then what? Rough. That is when you have letter F becoming PH or F becoming F, no matter how the situation may be. One other indicator of the spelling pronunciation inconsistency is the tendency of some letters to be silent, that is, not pronounced, even though they appear in spelling. The cases of initial K, that is K, and then W, that is W, being silent when followed by letter N or letter R. As in what? As in ni, no, not, right, wrong, etc., etc. These are just some few cases where you have this kind of differences. And again, when you have letter B, as in words like doubt, debt, lamb, womb, one may assume this is the correct pronunciation, but it is wrong. Why? Because the B there, letter B, is silent. Then what you have may be what? The equivalent as what? Doubt, debt, lamb, womb, come. So there is then the case of silent P again, as in what? Psychology. Psychology. The initial sound is letter P, but the P sound there is silent. Then you have some, then you have cups, etc. Well, the silent N is equally realized as in some words like condemn, solemn, and column. This N sound there, letter N, is not pronounced. Although all our examples above relate to consonant sounds, vowels also exhibit this kind of tendency. That is, for instance, when you have a vowel, it can have multiple ways of pronunciation. It can be a, it can be a, it can be it can be o. That is when you have, take for instance, some words like what? Hat, mat, stayed, laid, made, wore. The same are realized differently. The three features of English sounds discussed above can be clearly captured by the list below, which shows words in which all the 24 consonants and then the 20 vowels occur. Then you have what we call just an example of what? Sounds description. That is exemplifying the sounds. Here we have the bilabial sounds, that is letter P, B, T, D, as you have some words like pig, big, T, liturgy, that is for letter D. Same thing you have with K as in kangaroo, G as in get, God, M as in mammoth, N as in nyctophobia, L sound as in what? Sing, R as in radio, F as in what? Phonics, various, thing as in Th, then V's. You have silly as in S, zebra as in Z, ship as in sh, or machine, or mission, or pressure. Then you have J as in what? Treasure, H as in hotel, ha. Then you have L as in literal, Y as in yes, Sh as in chew, nature, J as in jowl, soldier, adjective, then W as in wet. All these exemplify the consonant sounds we are talking about. Then here we have vowel sounds. For the vowel sounds, there are the 12 basic, what we termed as the pure vowels. Why are they pure? Because we are talking about the monophthongs. They are monophthongs because they are pure vowels that has no combination. When we say pure, that is a substance that has no mixture. Then that substance is pure. Then you have what we termed as pure vowels. Here they are exemplified. E as in bee, bat, cat, fowl, cat, about, zoo, cream, burn, herd, corn. This is just some examples of what? Of the vowel sounds, the monophthongs we are talking about that were just being exemplified. Another thing is the issue of sounds. That is, how can we describe the sounds we are talking about? In order to facilitate identification and explanation of these sounds, linguists has devised parameters for describing them. This is based on the articulatory characteristics of each sound. That is, the sounds themselves, the 44 phonemes of English we're talking about, are divided into two. That is, those that we term them as consonant sounds, and then those that we look at them as what? Vowel sounds. What makes them consonant sounds? The first categorization. That is, we look at how the characteristic of each articulatory process. Then we determine the sounds based on the way how air goes out. By consonant sounds, there are sounds produced with what? With obstruction of air as a result of contact of the vocal organs. Here, three basic parameters are used in the classification of the consonant sounds. That is, looking at them from what? From the place or organs of speech that are employed during their production, giving the sound. That is, place of articulation. Then the second parameter is manner in which the organs make contact with each other. That is, we look at it as manner of articulation. Then the third parameter is the position or the degree of opening or the closure of the glottis. That is the vocal tract which allowed or obstruct the air that passes through. Then here are the identified three basic parameters employed to describe the consonant sounds. To start with, then we have the first basic parameter, which is place of articulation. By place of articulation, we mean organs that make contact, the place where the organs make contact with each other during the course of consonant production. These organs are termed as organs of speech. What are they? They are the lips, the teeth, the tongue, the velum, and the glottis, among others. In most cases, two of the organs contact with each other to produce a given sound. That is when you have, for instance, the upper and then the lower lips coming into contact. Then the sounds produced are what? Bilabial sounds. What makes them bilabial sounds? That it involves the contact of the upper and then the lower lips. So such sounds are referred as the bilabial sounds. And what are the sounds? They are P, B, M, and W. There are four bilabial sounds. Maybe letter P, letter P, letter M, and W. Similarly, looking at the organs that make contact this time around, not the two lips or the upper and then the lower lips, so to say, the lower lips will rise and make contact with the upper teeth. The result of which is what? Labiodental sound. This time around, it's not bilabial because it involves the two lips. For labiodental, it involves the lower lip and then the upper front teeth. Then what you have there, the sounds are referred to as labiodental sounds. And for English sounds, we have two of the labiodental sounds, the F and then the V. On other occasions, the tip of the tongue is moved to make contact with the alveolaries. That is the gum just above within the teeth. When this happens, sounds like t, d, s, z, n, l, and r are produced. And these sounds are referred to as alveolar sounds. What makes them alveolar sounds is because of what? The tip of the tongue rising, making contact with the roof of the mouth. That is the alveolar ridge. As you can see here, we have human organs of speech. Those organs are responsible for manufacturing the sounds we produce. We call them what? Human organs of speech. That is the normal organs we have, and we use them for other functions. The alveolar, the teeth, the tip, the blade, the front, the back, the vocal cords, the glottis, the windpipe, the esophagus, larynx, epiglottis, uvula, soft palate, the velum, hard palate, the nasal cavity. All these are termed as the organs of speech. Now, let us quickly look at what other category of the sounds production, that is, the manner in which the sounds are produced. By manner of articulation, it is meant that the nature of contact between organs that produce sounds, that is, the manner in which the contact is made, varies from pronunciation of one sound to the other. Two sounds can produce by the same organs, but different degrees of contact. For instance, both the sounds b and n are produced by two lips, that is bilabial, but they differ simply because the manner of contact is different. That is, when you have b and then m, we look at the sounds based on the manner within which the air goes out. The air is released of a sudden. That is when you have the sound b. But for m, the air is not released of a sudden. Based on this, we look at it as what? As manner within which the sounds are produced. In the pronunciation of some words, the organs come into contact very firm to each other, such that there ensues a total blockage. If that is the case, then here, the sounds produced are termed as plosive sounds, because the sudden separation of the organs allowing the trapped air to escape with an explosion produce such sounds. That is, the plosive sounds, or stops in some cases. Sounds produced this way are known as what? Plosive sounds. And what are the plosive sounds in English? We have p, t, k, b, d, and g. These are plosive sounds. In some other cases, the organs contact each other firmly, just as in the pronunciation of plosive sounds, only that the release is gradual rather than sudden, and air escapes with a continuous flow. Then the sounds produced are affricates. Affricates is the name given to the sounds because the release is not of a sudden. The release is gradual, and the sounds produced are ch and then j. These are the two sounds that are termed as affricates. The third category of sounds using this parameter are the fricative sounds. And the production of the fricative sounds, instead of making contact, only come close to each other, that is the organs, whereupon air is gradual release and continuously. So here, the sounds produced are fricatives. It assumes the features of affricates and then stops. But it marries the two and allows the air to go out continuously. Then the sounds produced are fricatives. What are the fricatives? They are, take for instance, letter S, letter Z, letter F, letter V. These are all termed as fricative sounds. And as we have said, it depends on the nature, that is the manner within which the air is released. That is what distinguishes the sounds. And again, the term nasal is used to refer to sounds that are produced through the nasal cavity, that is the nose. Unlike the case with oral sounds in which the venom's soft palate is raised to allow passage of air into the mouth, the production of nasal sound, the volume is lowered so that the oral cavity is blocked. This forces air to escape through the nasal cavity, that is the nose. So here you have what we term as the nasal sounds. What makes them nasals? The resonation of the nose. And what you have there are three different sounds of English. That is the m, the n, and then o, because the air escapes through the nose. Sounds referred to as glide or approximant are those in whose production no real contact is made by the organs. Instead, the articulating organs simply glide towards the direction of each other without making any firm contact. Then you have two sounds. You have W and Y. In some literature, they are referred to as semivowels or syllabic consonants. Depending on how we term them, they are here referred to as glide or approximants. And there are two. W, Y, as in English sounds. The literal sounds are those in whose pronunciation air passes from either or both sides of the mouth, rather than from the central part, which is the characteristics of most sounds. The only literal sound of English is letter L, that is L. So, these are sounds of English using manner of articulation as one of the basic parameters of sounds description. Then the next parameter, which is equally important in weighing the consonant sounds of English, is the state of the glottis or the status of the glottis. By glottis, we mean the opening within the windpipe through which air coming out of the lungs passes into the oral nasal cavity on its way out. This organ plays a prominent role in determining whether the sound is voice or voiceless. That is the degree of opening or closure of the glottis. When the glottis open up to allow the air to pass through, the sounds produced are voiceless. But when the glottis come up, as if it will contact each other to obstruct the air that is going out from the lungs, in which it forces the glottis to vibrate, then the sounds produced are voiced. In the pronunciation of English sounds, the glottis or the vocal cord assume two primary positions. As we have said, whether it obstructs the air that is coming out, which causes the glottis to vibrate, or no vibration. When you talk about voiceless sounds, that the glottis is not vibrating during the course of its production, you're talking about the voiceless sounds, which we have letter P, T, K, F, S, T, etc. In other instances, however, the glottis can be narrowed down so that the air passes with enough obstruction created to result into some vibration, that is the voiced sound we're talking about. Then you have sounds like maybe B, D, G, R. That is by touching your glottis, the Adam's apple, you will feel and notice the amount of vibration which distinguish between those sounds that are voice or voiceless. Then here we have a kind of chart called the International Phonetic Alphabet. This chart is the representation of the entire sounds of world languages. English sounds inclusive. That is when you look at the sounds from these three major basic parameters that we've explained, from places of articulation, manner of articulation, then status of the glottis, whether voice or voiceless. These are the three basic parameters devised to capture the sounds of all world languages, including English language. Here you have the places of articulation. On top, where you have bilabial, labiodental, dental, alveolar, postalveolar, retroflex, palatal, velar, uvular, pharyngeal, glottal, depending on the language in question. And our own case is English language. Then we look at English sounds based on the descriptions we've explained. For the manner of articulation, we have plosive, nasal, trail, taboflap, fricative, lateral fricative, approximant, lateral approximant. Then we're talking about the international phonetic alphabet. The one we have here on display is the revised edition in 1993. Now, here we are done with the consonant sounds. Another category of the sound we're going to look at has to do with the vowel sounds. If you could remember, we've said we have two categorizations, the consonant sounds and then the vowel sounds. Why are they consonants? Because there's an obstruction of air. Why are they vowels here? We're going to look at what happens that makes them vowel sounds. For vowel sounds, they are produced with a relatively freer flow of what? Of air than consonants. In the classification of vowel sounds, instead of three basic parameters, here we're using 4 parameters to describe each of the vowels. And here we're talking about 20 vowels of English. For the first parameter, we're using the position of tongue during production of that sound. And this can be whether the sound is high, mid, or low. That is the first parameter. The second parameter is part of the tongue. Which part of the tongue used? Is it the front, the central, or the back part? Then the third parameter is shape of the lips. The shape of the lips assumes 2 positions. That is whether the shape is round or unrounded. If the shape of the lips is round, it produces some certain vowels. That is also when it is unrounded. Then the last basic parameter for the vowels description is what? Is the length. That is the length of the vowel in question, whether the vowel is tense or lax. By tense, that is when the vowel is realized longer, or lax when it's realized shorter. That is, for instance, when you have, take for instance, a vowel E and E. The first one is a bit shorter than E, which is longer. So, here it should be noted that these parameters basically apply to monophthongs, that is the pure 12 vowels we've talked about, because the diphthongs and triphthongs, as we've said, are the combination of the pure vowels. And that is why we employ the term pure to describe the monophthongs. That is the 12th basic. Using the position of the tongue as a parameter, 4 vowels are classified as high. That is when we look at it from what? The first parameter, position. Position of what? Of the tongue. Then you have E, U, U. That tells you that the position of the tongue is high. For the mid vowels, you equally have this vowel. O, and A. These are what? Mid vowels. Then you have and as low vowels. That is for the mid criteria. And for the low criteria, 2 vowels are produced. And these are the vowels. Now, equally, we have the part of the tongue as a parameter. What makes part of the tongue important in the vowel description? The part you're using may either be front, center, or back. So, whichever part you're using, you're going to notice a kind of different what? Different vowels. That is when you have the front, the center, or the back part of the tongue involved. For the front vowels, you are using the contact of the front part of the tongue, which may create a kind of obstruction. Which will create a kind of describing the vowel based on how the air flows. In terms of shape of the lips, that is for the third parameter, as in the vowel description. These are the vowels that are captured, and they are termed as round vowels. Then the rest are unrounded. This shows that all back vowels are rounded, while the rest are unrounded. Of the 12 pure vowels being discussed, 5 are tense. What makes them tense? Because they are realized longer, while the remaining are 7 which are lax, which are short. So the difference here is either the vowel is realized long or short. And if the vowel is realized long, technically the term tense is used. And when the vowel is realized short, the term lax is used. So, what will differentiate between the two is the use of 2 dots. That is when you have a column before or after the sound. For instance, if you have E with 2 dots, then you have E. And when you have O, that is the vowel, then you have its counterpart with a colon, then you have oo. That tells you the first is what? Is realized shorter than the latter, which is realized longer. The difference between the two is what? Is either the first is in tense or the second is in lax. That is looking at the sounds based on tense or lax, the last parameter, which is length. Now, however, from what we have discussed, we've seen how the 44 English sounds can be categorized and then described. That is, looking at the sounds of English from the 2 categorization, the consonants and then the vowel sounds. What makes it consonant? There's an abstraction. Why are they vowels? There is no abstraction. In between consonant and vowel sounds is the amount of air that goes out involving organs A and B making firm contact to obstruct the air that goes out, then you're talking about consonant sound. And if there is no obstruction, you're talking about the vowel sounds. And for each of the categorization, linguists devised means through which the sounds can be weighed and described. That is, looking at consonant sounds from three basic parameters: place, manner, and status of the glottis. But for the vowel sounds, instead of three, we look at them and describe based on four basic parameters. That is, the part of the tongue involved, the height of the tongue, whether high, mid, or low, the shape of the lips, whether round or rounded, part of the tongue, as we've said, whether front, center, or back. Then the last parameter, as in length, whether the vowel in question is tense or lax. So from here, we've seen how English sounds that we termed as phonemes can be described. And we've seen why are they consonants and why are they vowels. All is geared towards an effective English sounds pronunciation, so as to have an effective and fluent use of the language. So thank you very much for giving us this interesting time to discuss about English sounds and pronunciation.